Chapter 51. You are listening at novelfull.audio. His mate. How absurd was that? Xenia mumbled to herself as soon as she was out of Minnie's chamber. Not everything in the world revolves around him, it was simply ridiculous. She honestly still couldn't process everything that just happened. In particular, the fact that she was now somehow Darius's mate. She would have shown her displeasure, but since she was with her family, she couldn't voice out even the slightest hint of pessimistic concern that she had about her being the werewolf king's mate. She had already worried her family enough with her running away. She didn't want to add an even more unnecessary burden on them with her petulant whining. Letting out a sigh, Xenia headed down to her own chambers. She had a lot going on in her mind, but all of it could wait. There were more pressing matters right now, and at the top of them was the protection of their kingdom. Walking through the hallway, she was in such deep thought that she didn't notice Darius was just outside her door. Leaning at the wall opposite her chambers, his arms were crossed as if showing his impatience at her arrival. She was just about to ignore him too. In fact, Xenia had only noticed him when he suddenly cleared his throat. Stopping right in front of him, she frowned at his presence. "What are you doing here?" she directly asked. She didn't see the point of addressing him as she used to like back when she was his so-called warrior servant. Darius already knew her real identity, and she didn't need to bother posturing to the king. "Checking on my mate," Darius plainly commented. "I won't run again if that's what you're worried about," Xenia scoffed. "You can stop being so vigilant around me now." For some reason, an atmosphere of awkwardness settled between them. Darius's predatory eyes looked so dangerous, looking at her as if she was his prey. It truly felt as if he wanted to devour her right at that moment. It was patently weird to think about. Blinking at him, her mind swam with numerous questions that she wanted to ask him. However, she wasn't really in the mood to play 20 questions with him at the moment. Instead, she coldly added, "If there's nothing else, then I'll be taking my leave. I need to go inside my room and get ready." "Are you mad?" Darius asked. "I'm not mad, Your Majesty," Xenia sighed as she turned to face him. "Please, can I take my leave now?" She didn't even know why she was entertaining him at the moment. She could always just leave right then and there, but that would simply be too rude to do on a king like Darius. Besides, she didn't want him to think that her parents didn't teach her any of the proper manners as a princess. She currently represented the royal family of Ebodia, and she would do her utmost to do at least that. "I find it weird to look at you wearing that kind of outfit, Zen," he commented. Hearing him, Xenia's eyes widened. Darius was flashing her a mischievous smirk on Darius. Acting on impulse, Xenia quickly checked their surroundings before she stressed out, "Your Majesty, please watch your actions, and address me properly as Princess Xenia." "Xenia. Your name sounds lovely, but I'm already used to calling you Zen," Darius musingly replied. "Likewise, you should start calling me Darius, Zen. If not, then you will leave me no choice but to remind you of how you should properly address your future husband." He scoffed, stepping closer to Xenia, "That is, of course, unless we can come to an agreement of having a better term for our loving endearment at one another." Xenia instinctively stepped back, her feet only stopping when her back hit the nearest wall. To her horror, Darius raised a hand to her face, suddenly removing the veil covering her face as he stared at her. She gulped, seeing the burning desire in his eyes that just oozed with raw unadulterated lust. The princess couldn't believe what she was seeing. She even blinked a few times just to make sure she wasn't mistaking those glowing predatory eyes of this werewolf king with something similar. The king then suddenly cupped her cheek, making her freeze right on the spot. His warm palm grazed against her skin. It felt so familiar somehow. "Say it. Say my name, Zen. I want you to address me with my name," he whispered, his eyes staring keenly at her green orbs before they slowly trained their gaze to her lips. "Those lips," Darius feverishly murmured. Xenia's eyes widened when she felt his thumb brush across her lips. Goosebumps appeared all over her body, and she didn't know why she wasn't doing anything. Why was she even standing still like a statue right now? She should have already hid his hand away from her face ages ago, and yet here she was. Unmoving and frozen like an idiot. Did you know that my wolf, Zeus, recognized you as my mate the moment you fell into my arms? Darius breathed at her, moving his head closer to hers as he sniffed her hair. Xenia was holding her breath. She felt butterflies fluttering inside her stomach, and the loud beating of her heart was so worrisome that she quietly hoped that she'd be okay. She even thanked the wall on her back for providing her with some much-needed support. Her knees had suddenly felt weak, and she was bracing herself just to stay upright. "You knew I'm a woman from the start?" she cautiously inquired, trying her best to distract herself from Darius's closeness and burning touches. "Well, Zeus did. But I was in denial at the time," Darius answered with a slight frown. "After all, you were still disguised as a man, Zen. And I can't simply take his word at face value. I needed to see and confirm it with my own eyes first." Seeing his expression, Xenia wondered what it was that caused his displeased reaction. And since they were already on the topic, she decided to take the opportunity and ask him one of her questions. "When did you confirm it? That I am a woman, I mean." Darius didn't answer. Instead, he leaned closer, almost hugging her with his frame as he whispered into her ear, "I'll tell that story to you later, once you've started calling me by my name, Zen. For now, I'll let you go so that you can prepare. We have a long journey ahead of us as soon as the wedding is finished." His breath hit her earlobe, every syllable enunciated dripping with lust. "I can't wait to mark you, Zen. To make you mine." Having heard enough, Xenia finally gathered enough of her strength to move her hands, placing them flat onto Darius's sturdy chest as she heaved. It was alarming. She couldn't believe what was happening to her at that moment. It felt like she was being hypnotized, and she didn't like that one bit. With that thought, she braced herself, pushing Darius out of her personal space as she retorted, "Please behave properly, Your Majesty. Remember, we are not yet married for you to start acting like this around me. I'm not your mate yet." "Yes, you are, Zen. I've already marked you several times already in my head, and I will make those scenarios a reality," Darius firmly stated. "Make no mistake, I will make you mine. All of you. Body, heart, and even your soul. Do look forward to it, my princess." Chapter 52. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xenia was frozen stiff at what she just heard from the king. Her arms faltered, the intensity of his words almost cowing her into submission. It was only when a sudden cough interrupted the scene between her and Darius that she managed to push the intruding king away. Letting out a short breath, she shakily declared, I appreciate you taking your time to visit me, but my mage and servants are already here to assist me in my preparations. If you'll excuse me, I shall take my leave." Xenia then quickly signaled for her chamberlain to open the door, after which she hastily walked inside without even looking back. Jaira and her servants followed her inside, shutting the door behind them as the princess let out a sigh of relief. "That looked intense," Jaira teasingly scoffed. Based on the look the mage was giving her, it was obvious that her friend was fishing for more details. Xenia let out a scoff as she replied with a wink, completely sidestepping Jaira's comment. "Quickly. Let's get ready." "Ah, so unfair, milady," Jaira whispered out with a pout. "How come I have to tell you every experience I get while you keep me in the dark like this?" Xenia simply let off a faint smile at her friend's complaints. Usually, Jaira would only address her by her name if there was no one around. They kept their casual conversations private and their interactions were quite limited since there were still servants around. Of course, outside the castle, both of them were known troublemakers. Xenia looked around, reminding Jaira that they weren't alone before letting off a light chuckle. "Fine, later then," she replied. "We'll talk along the journey, my friend. But for now, let's get ready." "Yay." Jaira let off a squeal as she enthusiastically answered. "All right, milady. I'll hold you to that later. Getting ready, all the preparations didn't take as much time than Xenia expected. Of course, she still made sure to properly take a bath since she felt so sticky and exhausted from all of the action she had just gone through. Going through the motions, the servants helped her get dressed in her combat armor. Jaira, meanwhile, prepared all her weapons to make sure that they were all sturdy and ready for battle. Once all was said and done, Jaira then dismissed everyone. It was only after the room had been emptied that she began speaking candidly. "All right. Now that we're all alone, you can start telling me everything," Jaira hummed in anticipation. Seeing her excitable friend, Xenia sighed as she replied, "There's nothing much to tell, Jaira, so unfair." Her friend scoffed with a pout, making Xenia chuckle. That was the same expression she had whenever she would ask Jaira for stories about her experiences. Mirthfully shaking her head, Xenia smiled as she resigned herself. "All right, fine. I'll give you a quick summary so you can stop asking." Jaira eagerly nodded, and Xenia let out a sigh as she finally told her friend a brief rundown on what exactly happened to her. By the time the princess was finished, the mage was practically giggling with excitement. "Wow!" Jaira burst out, her palm covering her lips in surprise. "That's definitely fate." "Absolutely not." Xenia vehemently denied it. "It's all nothing more than an unfortunate string of misfortune and coincidences." "Oh, stop being negative," Jaira waved her hand at her. "You always did say back then that there's always a purpose for everything that's happening in this world, and you're no exemption, Xenia. You met him because it's meant to be. It was bound to happen. Like how you turned out to be his future wife instead of marrying the vampire king." Jaira then cheekily poked the princess on her side as she teased further, "Look, I see that there's some tension between you and the werewolf king a while ago. And while one can say that it's nothing but hot air, I can definitely see something going on between the two of you." She shrugged. "Besides, and I'm sure you know it as well, the werewolf king is a very powerful and fine-looking man. I mean, he and the vampire king are both jaw-dropping to simply look at. In pure physical aspects alone, they're already in a different league than most men. Both of them are just oozing with majesty, class, and gallant." Xenia shook her head as she scoffed, "Close your mouth, Jaira. You're drooling too much." Hearing her, Jaira narrowed her eyes and said, "Don't tell me you think otherwise because I won't fall for that, my milady. I definitely saw something in your eyes when—" "Stop already, okay?" Xenia stressed out, stopping Jaira from finishing her teasing remark. "We both know I'd prefer marrying a human than any other kind of being." Do you still hate?" "No. I realized along the way that not all of them are bad, Jaira." Xenia cut her off. "Look, it was bad on my part to lump them all together and generalize them with one negative perspective," the princess admitted. "I won't criticize any kind of beings that are with us anymore, but let's face the fact that they're still far more powerful and dangerous than us humans. Look at how we need to cower behind them, resulting in forming an alliance with absurd conditions such as marriages like mine and Minnie. We're already lucky enough that Father at least found rulers like Darius and Nikolai who have some respect for humans. They at least see our kind as equals, but what if it was someone else? What if they weren't as generous? The kingdoms were constantly at war. Whether it was for territory or power, they had warred against one another restlessly for the past few millennia. Whether it be humans, vampires, werewolves, sorcerers, or demons, all were fighting for the right to rule over each other's dominion. Amid all this turmoil, the kingdoms ruled by humans were always considered the weakest. This weakness led the rulers of these kingdoms to forge unfavorable alliances to protect their families and subjects. One such human kingdom was their kingdom, Ebodia. I understand your sentiments, Xenia. But let's focus on the bright side, Jaira insisted, trying to lift her friend's spirit. Our seer Beirut also saw this coming, and he reassured the king and queen that you and Minnie will be in good hands in this lifetime. you mean Beirut also predicted that I'll be marrying the werewolf king? Xenia asked with wide eyes. Yes, he did. That's the reason why the king and queen somehow expected this already. Although, it still came as a surprise since we weren't sure how or when it might even happen, Jera replied with a nod of remembrance. All we knew back then was that Beirut mentioned that you were destined to meet a powerful man in this lifetime. A man who will keep you safe no matter what happens. A man who will fight against the whole world to stand by your side just to be with you. Jera cringed and added, ah. I'm still getting goosebumps just recalling how hauntingly Beirut predicted it. Seers can be scary sometimes. At this point, I wouldn't want to hear any sort of prediction about my life. Xenia murmured with a frown. So he didn't precisely mention that it would be the werewolf king. Well, who could it be then? Jeria wondered. Well, he also mentioned something about a rising dragon from Ebodia, but it's unclear how or when that will come true. A dragon. Xenia raised an eyebrow in skepticism. But it's been ages already since we heard of them. They're practically extinct. I know, right? But Beirut saw it coming regardless. Jeria shrugged with a heavy sigh. Anyway, let's wrap things up, shall we? The ceremony can start at any moment. Seeing her friend's reaction, Xenia couldn't help but feel a bit guilty for what was about to happen. I'm sorry I had to drag you with me like this, Jeria, she sighed. She knew how her friend hated going outside, especially out on the danger that was the battlefield. Please don't say that. I'm not here just because it's a part of my duty to the kingdom, Jeria reassured her with a smile. It's absolutely an honor just to be with you on this journey. Both as a mage, and as your friend, Xenia smiled at her friend. However, even as she showed her appreciation for Jera's words, her mind was already busy falling into deep thought. She wondered about Beirut's foresight and its implications. Could it be that the werewolf king was the one that the seer was referring to? Chapter 53. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Meanwhile, back in the Great Chamber, Darius was currently with King Stephen, discussing the latter's plans that he and his son, Ezekiel, had already put into action. His fellow king was elaborate in his explanations, talking about how almost the entirety of the Ebodian army had gone to meet Helion's armies halfway. Ezekiel doesn't want our enemies to go anywhere near our borders, and I agree with him, King Stephen explained. We want to limit as many civilian casualties within the kingdom as possible. The king let out a sigh as he continued, so far, I only have enough soldiers and knights deployed within and around the castle to protect its walls. I already sent most of them, including the majority of our mages, out into the front line to ensure the safety of our people and the protection of our borders. King Stephen fought off another sigh as he revealed their current position's weakness. This decision was the reason why it had been way too easy for the vampire king to surround his castle. He thought that he and his family could fend for themselves should the worst come to worst, so he reduced the amount of protection they had in their personal abode. He even decided to let their servants leave and go to their families, but none chose to leave when he gave them the opportunity. Instead, they insisted on staying with them to the bitter end. I see, Darius nodded, looking at the map his fellow king supplied to him. My best cavalry will reach the Ebodia encampment in one day, at the very least. He pointed at the location where Ezekiel supposedly deployed his troops and built the Ebodian head encampment. From what we know, Helion had sent an army numbering in the thousands. They're currently traveling through the forest, and I'm sure that there's more of them unaccounted for, Darius hummed. With enough soldiers from both Cordon and Valcrez, however, we will definitely win this war. It was simply inevitable. Ebodia was a kingdom with the highest population of mages compared to the other kingdoms, and harnessing that kind of manpower would be a great help against the tricks that the dark witches of Helion were harboring. I hope so too, King Stephen breathed out. He then intently looked at Darius as he wondered, cold. Could he possibly be the powerful man that Beirut foretold? The one that will keep my daughter, Xenia, safe no matter what. The identity of that powerful man in their seer's vision had been shrouded in mystery from the very beginning. And yet somehow, King Stefan felt relieved that his daughter would be in what he perceived to be safe hands. He could only hope that their seer, Beirut, was correct. Looking at King Darius, the werewolf king seemed to fit the powerful man Beirut described. Somehow he could sense that Darius cared for her daughter with how many times Darius saved and protected her when they were together. "What is it, King Stefan?" Darius suddenly asked, noticing how the Abodian king stared at him. "My daughter, Xenia, can be very stubborn compared to the rest of my children. Even if I didn't allow her to go to the battlefields, I'm sure she would simply sneak out and go help her brother anyway," King Stefan replied. "Though, she once mentioned how you two met and what the two of you have been through. If what she says is true, then I am indebted to you." He bowed his head ever so slightly as he continued, "I am very grateful that you saved my daughter. Please continue being patient with her, and I do hope that you will look after her, even if she herself may think otherwise." It was the only thing he could do as a father who sacrificed his own daughters to ensure the safety of his people. Seeing the king's humble gesture, a roguish smile appeared on Darius's face as he said, "Don't worry, King Stefan. As I said, Zen is my mate, and I'm sure you're already aware of what a werewolf could and would do just to protect and keep his mate safe." Satisfied with Darius's words, King Stefan gave his fellow king a nod of understanding. The two then further discussed the finer details of their future plans before Darius had to take his leave to go back to his chambers. Walking through the hallway, Darius had a satisfied smile on his face at a job well done. He was glad that King Stefan had practically given him his blessing, and was even vocal in entrusting him with the safety of his daughter. He didn't even need to say anything, Darius musingly thought. I can already tell how stubborn Zen can get just by being with her for almost a week. It's good that you're happy, but why do I feel like it will take you a long time to mark Zen? Zeus interrupted, killing the good momentum Darius was having. Stop it already, Zeus. Patience is a virtue. Darius sneered. He was getting tired of Zeus nagging him about marking Zen, making her his, and securing the mate bond. Of course, he wanted the same but not with Zeus's ways. Xenia was a human and he understood how it wouldn't be easy for Xenia to accept things so easily as his mate. She might submit as part of her duty and responsibility only, but he wanted more than that. You wouldn't last long anyway, Zeus snorted out of the blue, pertaining to the carnal desire Darius was controlling hard in suppressing over Zen's mere presence. Well, we have to, Zeus, so stop adding fuel to my torment already, Darius chided. Either way, I want to win her heart first. It'll be hard with how intense you can get. You need help, and you won't get it from me, Zeus scoffed. In any case, all I want you to do is to just sink your teeth into Zen's neck and mark her. It's the fastest way to form the mate bond, after all, so I'm telling you now, what you want to do is the hardest way that you can possibly imagine. His wolf mentally shook its head. Besides, we're both bad with words. Do you notice her reaction whenever you tell her that she's yours? It's pretty hard to interpret. If she's pleased or not, we can't even tell. Darius let out a sigh of frustration. Zeus was right. He was indeed struggling hard with trying to get a read on his mate. He didn't really know exactly what to do or how to even approach Zen without making himself look like a pathetic dog in her eyes. You're about to marry her anyway, so you already have a right to have her, Zeus reasoned. I still don't want to do it that way, Darius insisted. I want her to willingly surrender to me. Only then will I declare victory. And he would make it happen by all means. That was also the reason why he wanted Xenia to stay by his side even during the war. He wanted to take his time with her. For her to like him during those 30 days before their wedding. Absently walking by, Darius was almost near his private chamber when he suddenly stopped mid-step. Hearing bits and pieces of gossip coming from some of the servants, he raised an eyebrow as he paid a bit of attention to those fluttering words. Eavesdropping. This is unbecoming of you, Zeus scolded. But he heard Xenia's name somewhere, so he somehow just had to hear more. Ignoring Zeus's scolding, Darius braced himself on the nearest wall to hear more. It must have been so hard for Princess Xenia, one of the servants lamented. She clearly didn't want to marry the vampire king. And while she dodged that arrangement, fate simply had her marrying the werewolf king instead. She even despises them, right? Even calling those that aren't human monsters, another one of the servants commented. Yeah. I even recall her cursing demons, witches, werewolves, and vampires during one of her practice sessions in the training grounds, the first servant replied. She always goes on about how those dangerous creatures should be wiped out from this world, ranting about how they only bring chaos to humanity. And yet she's still bound to marry one. Still, I salute our princesses for sacrificing their own happiness for us, for all of us Ebodians, the other servant hummed. I also feel bad for our great constable Atlas. He loves our princess wholeheartedly, but, ugh. I'm getting myself down with this talk, the first servant grunted. Enough with this gossip already. Let's go back to work. As the two returned to their duties, Darius could only wonder to himself at what he just heard. Atlas. Who the hell is he? Good luck to you for winning her over, I'd say, Zeus teasingly laughed. I'm telling you, just mark her and claim your right as her husband and king. No need to torture yourself like this, you know. Chapter 54. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As soon as Xenia got dressed, she immediately proceeded to the castle chapel to witness the wedding of her sister, Mani, to the vampire king. It was a solemn and simple wedding, one following the rules and traditions of Ebodia. Looking one last look at herself, she knew she should be wearing something more feminine and befitting of her royal status like her mother, but she didn't really want to waste any more time changing clothes. Besides, no one would even dare point out the fact that she was dressed for battle, seeing the current situation they were in. Reaching the chapel, Xenia noted that a considerable number of royal families and their relatives were present. The officers of the state for the kingdom of Ebodia were also present, which was a given seeing as they were tasked to stay inside the castle to assist King Stefan during these trying times. She's so beautiful, Xenia whispered to her mother as she stood by her side. Mani was currently walking down the aisle, their father escorting her sister to the groom waiting by the altar. You two are both gorgeous, so I'm sure you'll also look as stunning as Mani on your own wedding day, her mother complimented, the older woman's hands holding Xenia's and squeezing it gently. The princess faintly smiled at the reassuring gesture. Her mother didn't say any more words, but Xenia knew that it was her way of comforting her about the fact that she was the next one to go through a political marriage. Still, despite the outward smile that her mother was showing, Xenia could feel how tense and worried their mother was, not just for her, but also for Mani. I'm sure you already talked to Beirut and received his assurances about Mani and my futures, Xenia whispered with a gentle smile. Don't worry, we already decided to follow this path that's been dealt to us. I'm sure both of us will live out our lives in relative happiness. Queen Dana nodded at her daughter's words. I can only hope so, she whispered out, gently caressing Xenia's cheek. I know that both you and Mani can handle these things head-on with all the positivity in you. Xenia had a beautiful smile at her mother's words. She had no choice but to hope for the best as well. Her eyes then fell towards Darius's direction together with the officers. He was in his combat outfit as well, his armor glistening against the light as he sat next to Gideon and Bardas. Noticing her gaze, Gideon smiled at her. Meanwhile, Bardas slightly bowed at her attention, making Xenia smile back with a slight bow of her as a greeting to both men. Xenia's gaze then shifted back to Darius once more. Like last time, chills ran through her spine just from the intensity of his gaze alone. Holding out for merely a few seconds, she immediately broke eye contact the moment it felt far too much. She felt like ice melting whenever she met his gaze, and doing such a thing for a prolonged period was currently an impossibility. At the toll of the chapel bells, the wedding ceremony finally started. It went relatively smoothly, and it ended soon enough with not much dilly-dallying due to more pressing matters. Time was simply precious, and they didn't have the energy nor resources to spare for a gaudy ceremony when war was looming on the horizon. After the wedding, Xenia along with her family walked Mini to the carriage with the Vampire King. "I must secure the safety of my wife, my family, and the council by taking them back to Valcrez," King Nikolai declared to her father. "As soon as I am able, I will then return with more of my soldiers as reinforcements to join the battle." "I understand," King Stefan promptly replied. "I am more than grateful for you putting the safety of my daughter first, and for honoring our traditions." Unlike Xenia, Mini's body was very fragile, so it would be safer if her sister stayed within Valcrez's more secure location. Xenia could only watch as her younger sister bid her farewell to their parents. Shaking off her mixed emotions, she turned to her and hugged her tightly. "Please take care, sister," Mini whispered into Xenia's ear. "We'll see each other again soon." Xenia only gave her sister a reassuring nod as she gently pushed her away, signaling her to enter the carriage. "Take care." Watching the carriage leave along with the rest of the Vampire King's denizens, Xenia held a deep breath as she prepared herself for what's to come. "We have to leave soon," Xenia heard Darius inform her parents. He then looked at her and said, "The carriage is ready." Xenia frowned when a carriage stopped by in her direction. "I will ride on my horse," Xenia firmly declared, her sharp gaze aimed directly at the king. "Can't you see that I'm on my armor? And you want me to ride inside a carriage?" "Xenia, that is not the proper way to talk to your future husband," her mother scolded her. Xenia's mouth twitched as she murmured, "My apologies, King Darius is simply concerned about your health and welfare," King Stefan reasoned. "You're still exhausted, so he wants you to travel as comfortably as possible." Xenia didn't bother replying, thinking that it would only be a temporary arrangement. Mentally shrugging, she bid her farewell to her parents and signaled Jaira to ride with her inside the carriage. "Let's go," she heard Darius instruct. At the king's command, the carriage moved along. They kept up their standard pace while they were still inside the territory of Ebodia. Sitting opposite of her, Jaira commented, "King Darius seems thoughtful." Her friend's teasing smile didn't escape Xenia's eyes, but she decided to ignore the mage, and instead, she simply blew air up on her forehead. "Technically, it's best that you ride inside the carriage. It's scorching outside, and with the sun being this blazing hot, you need enough rest," Jaira explained. "Besides, you've been through enough traveling in a while. Your inner force was depleted by the poison, and I won't let you tell me that you can still go out there like that." Xenia rolled her eyes. She was honestly feeling weird, but she just didn't want to entertain the foreign feelings swirling around within her. Not that she didn't care, but she simply didn't want to dwell too much on something that she knew wasn't even important at the moment. Still, a part of her knew that she wasn't ready to properly sort those feelings out. Thus, she often ended up sulking and acting grumpy around Darius as some sort of coping mechanism against those pesky foreign and confusing feelings she always felt around him. "By the way, should I apologize to them properly?" Jaira asked, breaking the sudden silence. Xenia looked at her and asked, "Huh?" She was interrupted from her deep thought, her mind still lingering on the things she should do in the 30 days grace period she had left before marrying the werewolf king. Unlike before, running away was no longer an option for her. "Those 2 werewolves I knocked out to sleep," Jaira reminded her. They don't even know that it's you who knocked them out," Xenia pointed out with a shrug. "Don't bother. Besides, you didn't technically harm them, so I think it isn't necessary. But that one with the scar. Bartis. He's a bit scary," Jaira breathed out. "Well, not physically since he's technically handsome despite the scar on his face, but what I mean is that it creeps me out how he looks at me as if he knows I did something bad to him." Xenia chuckled, "Ha. That's Bartis's normal expression, I think. Don't worry too much." "But I feel weird," her friend pouted. "I always somehow catch him looking at me." Not with a normal look, but it was too intense. It's as if he wants to eat me alive. What if I look like some kind of delicious meat in his eyes? There are those cannibal werewolves who prey on humans too, you know. Hearing her friend's concerns, Xenia chuckled and was about to say something when the carriage suddenly stopped. What's going on? Xenia murmured with a slight frown. Before she could assess what was happening, the door suddenly swung open from its hinges. It was Darius. "Milady, one of my men wanted to talk to you and discuss something important about our journey," he promptly spoke to Jaira. "We need a mage's guidance, so would you please step outside and join them on horseback?" "Yes, your majesty." Jaira quickly answered, quickly rushing out of the carriage without another word. Watching her friend leave, Xenia's frown deepened when Darius entered the carriage and replaced her friend's spot opposite her. "Move!" Darius yelled, and the carriage started moving once again. "Do you even need to be in here?" Xenia unknowingly voiced out her thoughts. With a devilish smile, Darius simply answered, "Yes. You're here, after all. Chapter 55. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Outside of the carriage, Jaira ended up riding on horseback, being sandwiched in between Gideon and Bardas as they trailed behind their respective liege. Having had enough of the silence, Gideon suddenly coughed and said, "Milady, we haven't introduced ourselves properly, so let me take the initiative to introduce myself. I am Gideon, one of the commanders of Cordon's Moonlight Knights." Jaira gave Gideon a smile and a slight bow as she replied, "I am Jaira, milord." She bit her lower lip, feeling guilty somehow at the two men that she once knocked out. Turning to the other rider with them, she gulped as she met Boris's eyes. Flashing an awkward smile, she gave him a slight bow. "Oh, that's Bardas," Gideon helpfully supplied. "He's also one of the—" "Spare the introductions, Gideon," Boris snorted. "I'm sure she already knows who we are." He then gave Jaira a piercing stare as he continued, "You're that mage who cast a spell on us to fall asleep." "She was." Gideon burst out. Jaira's face paled at the accusation. She had no way to refute it. She was tongue-tied. "Stop scaring her, Bardas," Gideon reasoned on her behalf. "She was only following instructions." "I'm sorry," Jaira finally said, her guilt only growing as she heard Gideon defending her. "It's all right, milady," Gideon nodded. "What matters is that everything turned out all right in the end. Our king has his mate now, and that's all that matters. Plus, the fact that Zen's an actual woman really helps smooth things out. Our princess loves to disguise herself, especially whenever she would sneak out of the castle walls," Jaira commented, feeling comfortable around Gideon as she made small talk. We can see that," Gideon sagely nodded. "She's quite good at that. I'm sure our king had quite a dilemma during those times. I mean, meeting his mate who turned out to be a lad," he grinned. Jaira simply nodded, making a conscious effort to avoid grabbing Bardas's attention. As much as she possibly could, she would only turn to her left where Gideon was currently riding beside her. Ednel.co, "Oh, right," Jaira trailed off in recollection. "Milord, His Majesty informed me that you needed to discuss some important things with me." "Oh, that," Gideon replied with an awkward smile. "Help me out here, Bardas." Gideon thought as he quickly sent out a telepathic message to his companion. "It's not like I'm the only one our king asked about this task. This is your forte, Gideon." "Not mine," Bardas coldly replied. "So why don't you do the honor of handling this task alone? I'll make sure to relay to our king that you didn't drop a sweat while fishing for more details about Ebodia's great constable Atlas." Gideon's shoulders dropped. It wasn't like he didn't see this coming anyway. "Yeah, we'll need some information regarding the high-ranking officers and Prince Ezekiel himself," Gideon started, trying his best not to sound suspicious as he continued. "You see, we already know a good deal about Prince Ezekiel, but not so much about his officers that we will have to work with in this battle. How about you orient us on the person in charge of Ebodia's army? The Great Constable, I hear his title was. Ah, right. Our Great Constable, Lord Atlas. Jaira perked up, her eyes lighting up as she explained. He's extraordinary, I must say. He's someone you can easily get along with, and he personally trained our Princess Xenia alongside Prince Ezekiel in all things regarding combat. She hummed in respect as she continued, he's an honorable officer and warrior whose cooperation with Prince Ezekiel has led to the current peace and order within our kingdom. Ah. I see, Gideon nodded in understanding. Such compliments. I'm sure a lot of women in your kingdom would want to marry such a fine young man. Definitely, Jaira answered with pride in her tone. Well, aside from our Prince Ezekiel, of course. He tops the list. Pardon me, milady, Gideon murmured, his hesitation bubbling forth as he asked. I don't want to sound rude, but I can't help but feel a bit concerned. Oh. Jaira raised an eyebrow with curiosity. Please speak freely, milord. Well, somehow, not intentionally but accidentally, I heard some servants gossiping about the princess while I was walking in the hallway, Gideon said. I can't help but feel wary. I'm not sure if I should report this to our king, so I decided to find out more about it before deciding if I need to report it or not. See how good you are. You're a natural liar, Bardas mentally scoffed with a straight face. No wonder our king specifically looked in your direction while giving out our instructions. If you're not going to help here, then would you please just keep your mind shut, my friend? Gideon snapped back. You're ruining my concentration here. And you do know what will happen if we don't get anything out of this task, right? Back in the actual conversation, Jaira had a frown as she asked, gossip about what, milord? About the Great Constable and Princess Xenia, Gideon replied with a straight face. Is there something going on between them before our king claimed her as her bride? Oh, that. Jaira gasped in recognition. No, there's nothing going on between them romantically if that's what you mean. I see, Gideon sagely hummed, seeming to understand. Our king is determined to win Princess Xenia over. If the rumors are true, then I guess His Majesty will have to work hard to. Princess Xenia doesn't have time to look at the opposite sex, Jaira firmly defended, making sure not to let more information than necessary slip through her lips. Even if there are countless men out there vying for her adoration, they could only do so from afar. Truly, Princess Xenia is not someone they can easily woo. That's the only thing that matters. Princess Xenia's heart, Gideon deftly hummed. So you mean to say that she has no one special in her heart right now, correct? Jaira smiled widely as she replied, none, milord, so you can freely relay this information back to His Majesty, King Darius. She then added, also, King Stefan already announced how she is to marry the werewolf king in 30 days, so I'm sure no one in their right mind would try to steal our princess from His Majesty, right? Gideon trailed off. Hopefully, she won't run away like she did to the Vampire King. Jaira had an awkward smile as she refuted, surely, our princess has learned her lesson already. She's the type who won't commit the same mistake again, milord, so please rest at ease. I see, Gideon gratefully nodded. Then I guess there's nothing to worry about. I won't report what I heard then to our king. Thank you so much for enlightening me, milady. You're welcome, milord, Jaira nodded as the conversation died down. Deep inside, however, she wondered how interesting things would get once they reached the Ebodia encampment. Princess Xenia was hard to read, and she was definitely someone who did what she wanted if she could easily get away with it. Chapter 56. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xenia let out a sigh as she kept her composure inside the carriage. It wasn't like she could kick Darius out of the carriage anyway, so she simply kept her silence. How are you feeling? Darius asked. Xenia returned his stare and promptly replied, I am good, milord. Darius, he corrected. I am fine, Darius. Xenia nonchalantly answered. Good, the king nodded. It's not like we're strangers to each other, Zen. On that, I'm sure you won't disagree. Xenia fought the urge to click her tongue. The werewolf king was right yet again. In the short period of time that they were together, they've actually been through a lot. They've even experienced a life-or-death situation together despite their best efforts. The princess let out a small breath. Since the two of them were together in the same space with no way out, she might as well ask Darius her questions. I already called you Darius, and I will continue addressing you by your name going forward, Xenia neutrally declared before she came in with her question. Although, can you tell me since when did you find out that I'm a woman? Darius almost cracked a smile as he replied, that day when I woke up in the cave and went out to look for you. I accidentally saw you taking a bath in the what? Xenia cut him off, her face glowing deep red as her eyes shot daggers at Darius. Does that mean he saw me naked? She inwardly cringed in horror. She absently hoped that she was wearing some semblance of clothing back then, but her memories showed that she was indeed naked at the time. As if reading her thoughts, Darius casually said, yeah. I saw it all. Xenia was rendered speechless at what she just heard. Embarrassment flowed through her as her horror peaked at that exact moment. You peeped at me, she murmured. How dare you? I most certainly did not, Darius firmly defended himself. Like I said, it was an accident seeing you naked like that. I was also stunned at the time. You were like a goddess, and I was so mesmerized by the sight of you, Zen. If not for that deer interrupting you, then I might have ended up just watching you bathe, he bluntly stated. What is wrong with him? She inwardly complained, her blush starting to reach critical levels as her heart fluttered beneath her chest. His words. It was so unlike him. She was caught off guard by his sweet words that she didn't know what to say. And his intense stare. Shaking her head, Xenia voiced out, you already knew but you didn't say a word. She stood her metaphorical ground, trying her best to keep her composure and act calm despite her feelings going completely haywire. It wasn't like she could reasonably scold the werewolf king by accidentally seeing her bathe in that water pool. It was an open area, and it was her fault for letting her guard down like that thinking he would be still unconscious. What, did she expect him to wait for her inside the cave without so much as moving? Hearing her words, Darius let out a sigh and replied, I didn't say a word because I thought you had your reasons for disguising. I'm not sure why I kept my silence about it either, but I guess I simply wanted to wait for you to open up to me at your own pace. He then added as she kept her silence, frankly, you don't know just how much grief you put me through while hiding your gender. I simply couldn't believe my wolf, Zeus, unless I confirmed it myself that you're a woman. So when I finally saw the truth with my own eyes, I guess that's the only thing that mattered. He shrugged, as such, I no longer confronted you about it. But you don't believe in tradition, she retorted, her lips pursed as she frowned. Why would you bring up the mate pull like that back in the meeting? Darius's lips curled as he gravely said, tell me, Zen, would you rather marry Nikolai than me? Xenia gulped at the stony expression, the seriousness that emanated from him almost smothering her along with that tightness in his eyes. Such a look could force anyone to answer him right away. However, Xenia didn't want to give him what he wanted so she kept her mouth shut. Zen, he repeated. I believe I don't have a say on anything about marriage, she gave out, her non-committal emphasized by her neutral tone. It's simply not up to me, milord. The decision on who I should marry or not falls to my father, the king. Although, it baffles me to hear you bring up the topic of mates a while ago. You clearly stated last time that you don't believe in those traditions, yes, but that was the case before you came into my life, Zen, Darius confessed. Hearing his words, Xenia blinked at him in disbelief. There was a cunning smile on Darius's face as he continued, from what I'm seeing, you look like you don't believe a single word I say, Zen. If so, then let me make it clear to you, he stressed out. Yes, The mate pull is strong, B. The king's words never left his mouth as Xenia felt the carriage suddenly come to a stop, causing her to bounce onto Darius, who instantly caught her in his arms. "What's going on?" she whispered. "Everything's fine," Darius reassured her. "There's just some kid who suddenly crossed the road, so the carriage suddenly stopped." "A mind link?" she inquired. "Yeah," Darius confirmed with a smile. "I asked Gideon, and he supplied me with the details." "Ugh. I feel dizzy all of a sudden," Xenia whispered, making Darius secure her in his arms, cradling her in his lap like a baby. "That doesn't mean you can hold me like this," Xenia weakly murmured. "You can put me down." "Shoo. Relax your body. You're technically recuperating, which is why I didn't let you ride a horse," Darius shushed her. "That poison in your system still left some minor side effects like this. Don't worry. Tomorrow, you'll be fully recovered." "But..." Xenia suddenly pursed her lips when Darius put his index finger on her lips, signaling her to stop talking. "Sleep some more, Zen. Rest while you can while we're still in Ebodian territory," Darius told her. "We won't get to stop for until we reach the border, so try to take advantage of the peace and rest." At his words, Xenia was reminded that she indeed felt drowsy as she murmured, "Here." Inside the carriage. She saw a naughty smile form on Darius's lips before he cheekily said, "In my arms, Zen. Rest here in my arms. I'm sure you'll find it more comfortable than anything else in this world." Xenia unknowingly chuckled before her eyelids finally gave in, closing themselves to the world around her and letting her sleep. Ednel.co staring at Xenia's beautiful sleeping face, a faint chuckle echoed from inside his head as Darius murmured, "Did I say something funny?" "You said something cringy," Zeus scoffed. "I actually didn't think you had it in you." "Me too," Darius mentally sighed. "Xenia," he lovingly whispered. "What do you think sounds better, Zeus? Should we call her Zen still? Or should we call her by her proper name?" Zeus rolled his eyes. "Why don't you call her the way she wants you to call her, A/N? What do you think Darius should call our stubborn princess? Any suggestions?" Chapter 57. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At Corden Kingdom. This is so sudden. Savannah, the queen mother of Corden, burst out the moment Leon personally delivered to her the news about the marriage alliance between Corden and Ebodia. Not even a prior announcement. What is he thinking? To be honest, we should have seen this coming the moment he left, Elder Nasser shrugged. Still, we're hopeful that our king will get a fair trade in this alliance that will benefit our kingdom as a whole. Perhaps Ebodia would kindly share with us their knowledge about magics, or perhaps they'd offer us a few of their mages and a seer as tribute. The elder then frowned upon looking at the missive sent by the messenger. However, looking at this copy of the alliance agreement, it says nothing about any sort of advantage we get from the union. This reads like we just got fleeced, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Letting out a sigh, Savannah closed her eyes as she helplessly leaned her back on her chair. She had just arrived at the castle from her prior journey to the west side of Corden. She had just finished overseeing the relief operations for the famine their people experienced because of an unexpected drought. Taking a small breath, her eyes darted at Clara before she heaved out a long deep sigh. Clara was the one she was eyeing to be Darius's companion for the throne, but seemed as if his son had other ideas. Then again, it wasn't against their kingdom's traditions for the king to have a number of lady consorts from other different kingdoms if it was for the purpose of forming an alliance. It was a very common thing to do for the rulers of their era, after all. Giving the woman another look, Savannah couldn't help but let out another small breath of regret. She was aware of how Clara felt for her son, Darius, and as a woman, she couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. She could only imagine what Clara was feeling at that moment. "I want details, Leon," the queen mother turned to Leon as she inquired. Leon slightly bowed and reported, "Unfortunately, Queen Mother, I also don't have all the details." I'm simply relaying what Commander Gideon gave to me, mentioning that the king signed an agreement for a marriage alliance to Ebodia and that he'll be marrying the eldest princess of Ebodia. He then continued, apparently, this princess is his mate, and the wedding will take place after 30 days of waiting. He also instructed the Moonlight Cavalry to make their way to the Ebodia encampment to serve as reinforcements to our newest allies. Mate. Haha. Is our king playing a fool of us? Elder Nasser snorted. Since when did he believe in the mate pull? I do believe he takes such things seriously now, my lord, Leon couldn't help but answer back, a hint of excitement evident in the young Beta's voice. After encountering the phenomenon himself, he's nothing but acting upon the very thing he once thought as myth. Shaking her head, another sigh came out from Savannah's lips. A mate pull. No wonder her son had a hard time maintaining his rationality given the current situation. She frowned at the officers before her and said, our king has his reasons. His words might seem strange, but we must trust him. Even though that Ebodian princess is his mate, that doesn't mean that she will be our Queen Luna. She stressed, we have traditions, laws and orders to which our king gave his vows to honor during his reign, none no longer dared to speak against the Queen Mother's words. Seeing the silence, she immediately asserted herself once more as she added, this war between kingdoms will take both time and resources. Hopefully, it will be over as swiftly as possible. For now, let's focus on protecting and taking care of our fellow Korjans while the king is still on the battlefield. She then looked at Helas and instructed, you will take charge of our general affairs while our king is out, so make sure that everything in our kingdom is well accounted for. She stressed, ensure the peace and order within our borders in the king's absence. Yes, Queen Mother, Helas slightly bowed in deference. As soon as the words left her mouth, Savannah didn't fail to notice the slight smirk on Nasser's face that disappeared just as quickly. There was something there, but she elected to shake her head as she stood up. She then looked at Clara and said, the rest of the Moonlight Knights are already with our king, and he specifically only asked for the cavalry. Thus, the remaining Moonlight Knights should stay here in the kingdom to help Helas keep the peace and order. Hearing her orders, the rest of the Moonlight Knights bowed their heads, including Leon, as they all showed their respect to the older monarch. Seeing that her subjects had taken her orders well, Savannah then declared, if that is all, I'll be going to my chambers. Taking her leave, the Queen Mother left the throne room, Clara immediately moving to assist her through the hallway. You don't need to walk with me, dear, Savannah noted with a soft smile. It's all right, Queen Mother, Clara gracefully smiled. Just let me safely walk you to your chambers before I leave to do my duties. Thank you, my dear. Hearing her earnest reply, Savannah gave her a grateful smile as she let the young woman usher her back to her room. Still, a few thoughts came into her mind as they walked. Are you displeased that Darius is marrying an Ebodian princess? Savannah asked Clara directly. To her credit, Clara simply let out a neutral reply to her question. I have no right to be displeased, Queen Mother. Don't worry, I'll talk to my son as soon as he comes back, Savannah reassured the young woman. No matter what happens, we shall proceed with the proper traditions in the selection of a Queen Luna, someone who is blessed by our Almighty for our kingdom to prosper. She then added, you should prepare for the days ahead. Although, I'm sure that none in this kingdom is comparable to your capabilities, Clara. You'll surely pass all the trials for a queen. Clara gave the Queen Mother a bashful smile. Clara and Darius grew up together, and no one knew her son better than the young woman before her. Added to that, her parents were very loyal to her husband, a pair of warriors that any Cordonian could be proud of. However, both of them died during the war 20 years ago, leaving Clara in her protection. Practically raising her as their own, Clara lived her life serving their kingdom and aiding Darius with everything that he might need. Savannah could even say that Darius wouldn't be where he was right now if it weren't for the young woman's loyalty, support, and aid as the alpha of Midnight Pack, which was currently the third largest pack within their kingdom. Soon enough, the two reached the Queen Mother's chambers, Savannah nodding in acknowledgement as they stood in wait. "We're here, Queen Mother," Clara politely said as they both waited for the servants to open the door for her. Seeing her dedication, Savannah held Clara's hand, gently squeezing it in reassurance as she said, "Hang in there, dear. I'll talk to Darius as soon as he comes home." Clara couldn't help but smile at the gesture. "Thank you, Queen Mother." "You're welcome, dear," Savannah nodded in appreciation. "You may leave." Watching the young Alpha leave, Savannah let out a small sigh as she walked inside her chambers. Weakly sitting on the nearest chair, she asked one of her available servants to prepare her a cup of tea. She then closed her eyes as she let out yet another frustrated sigh. Looking at all the cards, it was clear that her son Darius was the only problem. He merely saw Clara as nothing more than a sister, far from mate material if he was asked about the topic. "This will be hard, especially now that he has found his mate," Savannah lamented. "What should I do, Lucian? This could cause a political uproar, /n, sorry I have to mention it here to make sure everyone could see it, haha. Please leave our book a review for the ratings. Thank you so much. XD. Chapter 58. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Leaving the Queen Mother for her duties, Clara kept her composure as she strode forth. From the moment she heard of the unwanted news of Darius accepting a marriage alliance from an Ebodian, she was already inwardly seething with annoyance. And to make matters worse, the fact that he apparently found his mate meant that the hill she had to climb just got steeper. "Good day, Alpha Clara." "Greetings, Alpha Clara." Walking through the halls, everyone who passed by her showed her their utmost respect and adoration. As usual, Clara gave them her typical smile and greeting, showing them her usual demeanor despite her current feelings. Whenever the hallway was empty, she would immediately grit her teeth, her jaw clenching as she walked past. "The hell am I supposed to do?" she balled her fists, her knuckles going white as she kept up with her long strides. Eventually, she reached her bedchambers, her anger boiling over as she abruptly closed the door behind her. She frowned seeing an unwanted visitor in her chamber. Watching your real face since you appeared so calm and cool a while ago before everyone is really interesting," Hilas taunted. "What are you doing here?" she wryly hissed. "Get out." To her chagrin, the man didn't even budge in the slightest as he gave her a cunning smile. How she hated him for his manipulative smiles. "I'm already comfy in this chair though," he smirked. "Not even going to treat me as a guest." Clara growled at the annoying man. Hilas was a thorn in her life. Of all the people she knew, he was the only one who could somehow see through her, and she hated him for it. To all, she was someone who should be treated with respect and honor, but Hilas knew just how crafty she was. That behind her smile and good deeds hid an evil who would do even the most heinous of things just to achieve her only desire. "Darius. You don't deserve that much," she scoffed. "Ah, but what if I do?" Hilas quipped, taking something out of his pockets. "Looky here, Clara." Her frown deepened as she stared at the object Hilas was holding. It looked like an identification tag. It wasn't a common tag either. Its owner was obviously someone from a royal family simply based on how well it was crafted. "What's that?" Clara blurted out as she walked towards Hilas, snatching the tag made of gold with a dragon's emblem marking it. "Princess Xenia of the Kingdom of Ebodia," she read the markings. "Where did you get this?" Clara inquired with knitted brows, gingerly handling the tags. I saw one of the merchant's kids playing with it just this morning," Hilas playfully replied. "Kids?" "Yeah," he shrugged. "King Darius brought them here while you were away with the Queen Mother. They saved those merchants from barbarians on their way back to the kingdom. There was one particular lad that King Darius favored among those survivors." He placed a finger on his chin as he continued. "I believe it's that lad I heard he claimed as his warrior-servant. The lad's name is Zen. A beautiful lad, I must say. Those forest green eyes are just too stunning and alive, just get to the point. Clara impatiently remarked, making Hylas chuckle. Oh. But where's the fun in that? She almost let off a growl in outright anger. Hylas was a mystery to her. His father, Elder Nasser, was always too vocal with how much he opposed King Darius with every decision. Still, everyone was aware of how the elder was bitter even after all these years since his son Hylas lost the fight against Darius at the battle for the throne. That was 10 years ago, and the old man was still hanging on to old wounds. Make no mistake, Hylas was a good fighter, but he wasn't as good nor as blessed as Darius in terms of both physicality and skill. Even so, Hylas had a good relationship with Darius. It's because of this that she couldn't tell whether he was for or against Darius as their current king. It didn't help fate he often took a neutral stance on things. He would agree or oppose Darius based on his opinions, he was just too hard to read in general. The only thing she knew for certain was the fact that Hylas loved to pester and bug her randomly like this. Still, Clara could feel that there was something more to Hylas, as if the man was just waiting for the right opportunity to enact his plans. It was for that reason that she was letting the man annoy her. It was so that she could fish for information that she could use against him. After all, she wouldn't spare the man if he ever moved against Darius. Alright, fine, Hylas shrugged. That Zen looks too familiar. You're well aware that I often visited Ebodia since it's my mother's homeland. That lad is Princess Xenia, the one who owned that tag. And why would she disguise herself? Clara retorted, her eyes widened as she cursed. Wait. That bitch. Did she plan everything all along to seduce Darius? A burst of loud and crisp laughter roared from inside Clara's room. Oh, Clara. You're really funny. Till when do you plan on acting blind just because of Darius? He teased her. She's Darius's mate. And obviously, their meeting is simply ordained by fate. Maybe you can even ask for the whole story once Gideon returns. I'm sure he'll be more than enthusiastic about giving you every bit of detail in regards to what happened. Ugh, she groaned. Having had his fun, Hylas stood up from where he was sitting and continued, well, consider me generous today, Clara. Who knows? You might be able to use that royal tag to your advantage. A little tweak in the story in a few parts, and you can easily make Princess Xenia's name hated throughout the whole kingdom of Corden. He then chuckled as he teased, although, I'm not sure if Darius would still choose the kingdom if he had to do so over his mate. Maybe he'll choose the kingdom since his father died just to make sure he ruled. Or perhaps we cannot underestimate the power of the mate pull. Am I right? Clara refused to say a word, but her face reddened as she chided, get out now, Hylas. She flinched when Hylas held her shoulders and whispered, how come you're always angry whenever you will see me, Clara? Shouldn't you be thanking me since I'm helping you achieve your goals? He then whispered into her ear, tell me. Isn't your only goal in this world to stay by Darius's side as his lifetime partner? As his wife? His Luna? Clara closed her eyes and grunted, if you're still here once I open my eyes, gone. Hylas cheekily yelped as he continued laughing on his way towards the door. It's not too late though, Clara. With Darius, everything will be hard. But if you chose to side with me and be with me, I'll give you everything you might ever want in this world. Ignoring his goading words, Clara finally opened her eyes, her sharp eyes glaring at the closed door behind her. What a pain. It was the first time she heard Hylas ever bargain with her so bluntly. He's planning something against Darius, Clara whispered to herself. And she would make sure to stop it. But for the meantime. Raising her hand up to her face, she took a closer look at the golden tag resting on her palm. Xenia, she whispered with gritted teeth, her grip on the tag making her knuckles turn white. It was unacceptable. She wouldn't let anyone go in between her and Darius. She wouldn't let anyone have Darius, because Darius was hers and hers alone. Chapter 59. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xenia shivered in her sleep. Beads of sweat formed on her face as she moved restlessly in her dreams. Letting out a soft moan, she felt as if she was about to fall off when she suddenly jolted out from her sleep. "What was that?" she whispered out, panting hard as she sat upright. Placing a hand on her chest, she was still catching her breath when she tried her best to gather her bearings. She just had a dream that she never thought she'd ever get in her. Her face reddened in embarrassment as she murmured, "It's just a dream." But it felt so real. And why would I even dream of something like that? She frowned at the memory, displeased with the kind of dream she was just given. Looking around, her frown deepened further when she just realized that she was on a comfortable mattress inside a small tent, one that could only fit 2 people of her size. Quickly gathering her bearings, Xenia steeled herself as she went out of the tent. "Darius," she whispered out, only to be surprised as she saw Darius sitting on the side of her tent, his back against it as if he was guarding it. Looking back, she thought about how she could easily identify the werewolf king no matter what state he was in. It was probably because he was the only man by far that she saw with silver-colored hair. Hearing her, the king quickly got up and turned to her, flashing her a studly and cocky smile as if he expected her to address him. Xenia felt her heart hammer inside her chest as she blinked, finding herself staring blankly at his dashing face as she took in his features. Her eyes honed in on his face, a few strands of his loosely gathered hair hanging lazily behind his tied-up hair. Desperately trying to get a hold of herself, Xenia gulped hard, her throat feeling so dry that she wanted to grab a drink for herself. And if that wasn't enough, the dream she just had a while ago suddenly flashed through her eyes, her verdant green orbs widening in disbelief. Meanwhile, Darius frowned as he noticed her reactions. He was about to touch her face when she suddenly flinched, unconsciously stepping back away from his reach. "Apologies," Darius commented, still studying her face closely. "I just wanted to check your temperature since you don't look too well." "I am fine, Milo." "Darius," Xenia stuttered, hastily correcting herself as she continued. "It's just that I had a bad dream, and I'm kind of dazed from it." She immediately scolded herself for acting like such an amateur. This wasn't the first time she talked to the man. Why in the world was she so nervous? "A bad dream?" Darius curiously asked. "Like what?" Xenia's face paled as she bit her inner cheek. It wasn't a bad dream at all. What she had was an erotic dream, and there was no way in hell that she would share it with this werewolf king. "It's just about this war we're about to face," Xenia plainly replied, trying her best to hide her awkwardness with a smile. Darius smiled at her words and casually commented, "Well, next time, you should dream about something else." He hummed, "How about having a dream about you and me? Or at least recalling how you made me suff." Xenia's body froze as she stared at Darius, her curious eyes making the man stop talking. Finding her courage, she asked, "I made you what?" Never mind," the king waved her off. "Anyway, why don't you stay inside? I'll bring you something to eat. You're probably just hungry." As he quickly stood up and left her, Xenia could only watch Darius's retreating back as she wondered. He sounded like he knows something. Should I press him harder about it when he comes back? It was a decent idea, but she quickly dismissed the idea thinking that it won't do her any good in the process. Letting out a breath of air, she looked around once more. It was already dark out, and their group had lit a fire that gave out just enough light to illuminate their small camp. They were already outside the borders of Ebodia, camping within cover of the nearby forest. As she recalled, they left around noontime, which meant some time had passed before she finally woke up. "I slept too long," Xenia sighed. She felt stronger, at least, but thinking about the dream she had a while ago only made her feel weak again. Weak, and a bit disturbed. "Yes, you did, milady," Jera chimed in, suddenly appearing beside her as she teased. "The king was very thoughtful, you know. Making sure that you got enough rest and all that." I guess he's seriously into you. After all, you're his mate. I still can't believe it, Jaira, Xenia sighed. Don't you think it's quite unfair? I mean, I'm his mate, apparently, but I am not sure how to reciprocate with this whole idea. Especially so when we don't even share the same traditions. Jaira chuckled, it's not that hard to follow, Xenia. A mate for werewolves. That's just another term for lifelong partner for us humans. There's a difference, Jaira, Xenia exasperatedly corrected. What if I'm just his mate and not the love of his life? We can choose to love the person we want, Jaira. For me, love is always a choice, not fate. But in their case, it seems like this mate pool decides their partner for them. Jaira shook her head as she scolded, this is why you shouldn't skip important classes, milady. See how little you know about werewolves. Xenia turned and frowned at Jaira, explain. Jaira chuckled as she began, well, werewolves also have the choice to reject the mate pull if they wanted to. I've heard some real-life stories about it as well, so it should be real. Rejection can also happen when the feelings between mates are not mutual. It's supposedly very painful for a werewolf, and some even died due to the intense and painful emotions it could cause. She then sighed and continued, although some werewolves could fall in love naturally without the mate pull. There are also cases where they experienced the mate pull when they already had someone in their heart. In the end, some still choose the person they fall in love with instead of their so-called mate, while others will simply choose their actual mate. She sagely nodded, there are different cases of it, you see. Not every werewolf is blessed to experience the mate pull, and not all werewolves experiencing the mate pull end up having mutual feelings for one another. You just made my head spin, Jaira, Xenia complained. And that's why I hate attending boring classes such as that. Nevertheless, I guess I should make the most of how my life should be from now on. I could probably make things somehow workable between Darius and I. Things will definitely work out, milady, Jaira reassured her with a giggle. I can see how much the werewolf king is into you. No wonder many die from delusions, Jaira, Xenia scoffed. She wouldn't want to be delusional. It was always best to stay in the safe zone for now. Chapter 60 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Right, I need to discuss some important things with you, Xenia, Jaira suddenly informed the princess. Unfortunately, this isn't the place to do so. I'll tell you more about it later once we reach the encampment. Xenia simply nodded in acknowledgement. Fair enough. By the way, how are you feeling? Jaira casually followed up. Better, at least, Xenia replied, casually looking at Darius as he walked towards them. Just a bit hungry is all. Oh, here's your dinner then, milady, Jaira teased her with a giggle. I should go now and give you two some private time. She was about to say more, but a pointed glare from Xenia quickly made her press her lips together. She then promptly left, wordlessly passing the king in return. Here, Darius said with a smile, handing her a tray of meals. Thank you, Xenia promptly replied before she looked around the camp with a frown. Am I the only one using a tent tonight? The soldiers didn't bother setting up more for themselves since we'll be back on the road before the sunrise, Darius explained. Either way, this forest is very safe, so they can rest and sleep with minimal risk. I can do without a tent like others, she pointed out. You didn't. You're soon to be my wife and queen, so I want the best treatment for you, Zen, Darius frowned as he interrupted her. If possible, I would have even ordered them to set up a huge tent where I can sleep with you. Unfortunately, such a task will be too time-consuming. We're already in a hurry. Wait. What? Sleep with me. We're not even married yet. Xenia burst out loud. Before she could interject further, she gulped when she noticed foreign eyes landing toward her and Darius. They were making a scene, and she didn't like it one bit. Meanwhile, the werewolf king seemed wholly unaffected. Forming a vicious smile on his lips, he simply stood at the ready while she was already glowing bloody red from embarrassment. What are you thinking about, Zen? I'm simply saying that you and I would have literally slept together, Darius scoffed. We'll rest not as a married couple, but as a warrior-servant and her king. Although, if you already wish that the two of us sleep together as a married couple, then I'd be more than willing to oblige at this instant. Xenia almost wanted to scoff. She could swear that she saw his eyes glint with amusement. What did she even do to deserve this? Ah, right. She owed him her life even though she wanted to refute that they were already even the moment she saved his life too. Back when they jumped to that cliff and he lost consciousness, her taking care of him then should have counted. Still, the fact remained that they weren't even because somehow, Darius also saved her life by shielding her with his own from those poisonous arrows. And that wasn't to mention how he saved her again when she accidentally got poisoned by those berries. Hearing his words, Xenia refused to comment on them as just sat comfortably to eat her meal. Though, the silence was broken once more as she tried sating her curiosity. How about you? She asked when Darius sat beside her. You're not gonna eat. I've already eaten, Darius promptly answered. I ate with my men a while ago while you're asleep. Xenia only nodded as she started eating. Taking her first bite, she couldn't help but feel conscious as Darius hovered over her. What is it? She asked. Nothing, Darius scoffed. It's just that I noticed only now that you eat in the same way as you've always done while you're still disguised as Zen. Very feminine and lovely, I must say. Xenia furiously blushed, and it was a good thing that the light wasn't strong enough to completely show her face. She bit her inner cheek, trying her best to act calm and composed like usual despite the wild beating of her heart. Stop making her uncomfortable. You might be overdoing it. Try opening up a different topic. Hearing Zeus scolding in his mind, Darius gulped as he considered his suggestions. It was indeed so unlike him to say such sweet and flattering words, but it just seemingly came naturally to him whenever he was with Zen. And it all started when he managed to confirm her gender. He simply wanted to be vocal around her, which surprised him as well. It was so out of character of him. She didn't say a single word about us sleeping together, and I'm already being cautious not to bring it up again since I'm not sure if her silence means yes, Darius inwardly groaned. Though, do you think she meant that as a yes? Maybe. Yes. Zeus guessed aloud. Don't ask her again. Just assume it means yes. Now, divert the topic. Heeding his wolf's advice, Darius let out a sigh and said, We'll arrive at the Abodia encampment at nighttime. Hopefully, we'll have a smooth journey without us encountering any troops from Helion. He then hummed and thought, the wolves are overseeing our pathways. After eating, you should get more sleep. I'll be here outside to watch over your tent. Xenia merely nodded as she then curiously asked, How long do you think this war will take? It wasn't the first time that their kingdom faced war or a clash against others that wanted to conquer their lands. Only, this time, the one trying to do so was Helion, the Devil's Kingdom himself, who already conquered a lot of foreign lands to expand their territory. It will take time. I don't see Helion easily giving up Abodia, Darius pondered. They need to conquer your kingdom by any means necessary since it's the only way for them to get through Cordon. Them taking your lands would mean a higher chance for them to take our kingdom down. Xenia nodded in agreement. She also thought the same, but she still wanted to know what Darius's perspective was in this war. So they want to use our kingdom as a major logistical channel for all the supplies they'd need to conquer Cordon, Xenia concluded with gritted teeth. Just how greedy could that Helion king be? She inwardly seethed. Being at war wasn't easy. One would need enough provisions and shelter to maintain the stability of their soldiers. And it wasn't just physically, but also mentally to keep up morale. Precisely, Darius nodded. Your kingdom is in the best strategic position to be used as a staging ground for their ambitions. This war, it's really not against Abodia, but against our kingdom, Cordon. Xenia stared at Darius and mused, no wonder he went through this marriage alliance even though he doesn't believe in the mate pull. In the end, everything's all about political tactics, a game played for the welfare of his own kingdom. It was a sizable thought. A while ago, Darius made her heart race and jump for joy just by him stating that she was his soon-to-be wife and queen. Now, however, her heart felt like it just dropped into her stomach, not to mention the sudden tightness developing within her chest. Feeling rather ill, she suddenly coughed, making Darius quickly hand her his water flask. Taking the offer, Xenia instantly drank to clear her throat. "Thank you, my lord," Xenia coldly replied. "I'm done eating, and will now be going back inside the tent to rest." Without another word, she hastily went back inside the tent, leaving Darius agape as he stared dumbfounded. "Did I do something wrong?" Darius murmured with a frown.